The scent of betrayal wasn't cheap perfume on a collar or a stray lipstick stain. In the 10 years Eleanor had been married to Marcus Vance, she'd learned that clichés were for amateurs, and Marcus, if nothing else, was a professional. The scent was far more subtle, an almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere of their meticulously curated home. It was the sterile floral note of a specific hand soap, the kind used in the gleaming, impersonal bathrooms of upscale hotels and new condominium buildings. He'd come home smelling of it 3 times in the last month, a ghost of a fragrance clinging to the cuffs of his expensive shirts. Their life, from the outside, was a portrait of quiet success. A handsome brownstone in a leafy suburb, 2 well-behaved sedans in the driveway, and a marriage that hummed along with the polite efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Marcus was a senior marketing director at a thriving tech firm, a man whose charisma was his greatest asset. He was tall, with a smile that could disarm a boardroom and a voice that wrapped around you like cashmere. He loved Eleanor, he told everyone, for her steadiness, her quiet grace. He called her his anchor. But anchors, Eleanor knew, were meant to be hidden beneath the surface, heavy and unseen, holding the glittering ship in place while it caught all the sun. She had cultivated this persona of simple contentment. She managed their home, volunteered at the local library, and tended to a garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. She wore sensible cardigans and her hair in a simple, elegant chignon. Marcus saw a woman who was happy with her lot, a wife who existed to smooth the edges of his demanding life. He never once questioned where she came from, not really. He accepted her story of a modest upbringing, of parents who had passed away, leaving her a small but comfortable inheritance that had allowed them their down payment. He never dug deeper because the narrative suited him. It made him the provider, the achiever, the one who had elevated her. The truth was a continent away from his perception. Eleanor's small inheritance was, in fact, the carefully managed multi-generational fortune of the Sterling Rhodes family, a name synonymous with old money, quiet philanthropy, and sprawling real estate holdings on the East Coast. She was the sole heir. She had walked away from that world, exhausted by its gilded cage, wanting to be loved for who she was, not what she was worth. She had met Marcus, a man with ambition burning in his eyes, and believed she had found it. For a decade she had played the part, carefully managing her assets through a discreet family lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, while living on Marcus's salary. It was a test, a long and patient experiment. She had wanted to prove that their foundation was built on love, not her hidden bedrock of wealth. But the foundation had begun to crack. It wasn't just the phantom soap scent. It was the way he looked at his phone, angling it away from her with a casualness that was too practiced. It was the late-night strategy sessions that multiplied with alarming frequency. It was the condescension that now laced his compliments. "You're so good at these simple things, Elle," he'd say as she served dinner, a pat on the head for a prized pet. Or, "I don't know what I'd do without you keeping things grounded here at home," which she now understood to mean, "Thank you for staying in your small, predictable box while I live a bigger life outside it." The first concrete piece of evidence arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet rustle of an envelope. A credit card statement, mistakenly sent to the house instead of his office P.O. box. Marcus was usually meticulous about his paperwork. This was a rare slip. Eleanor saw it on the hall table, his name printed above their address. A flicker of something, not just suspicion, but a cold, clarifying certainty, made her pick it up. Her hands didn't even tremble as she slit it open. There, amidst the charges for his usual lunches and gas, were 2 entries that stood out. A recurring monthly payment to a high-end floral service she had never heard of, and a single staggering charge from a boutique jeweler, Bijoux de Luxe, for an amount that would have covered their mortgage for 3 months. The piece was described on the statement with a sterile code, but a quick search online revealed it. The Eternity Pendant, a cascading waterfall of diamonds set in platinum. It was not her anniversary. It was not her birthday. She had not received a waterfall of diamonds. Eleanor folded the paper, her movements precise and calm. The hurt was a deep, cold stone in her stomach, but it was being rapidly encased in something harder, something sharper. Ice. She looked around the living room, at the furniture he had picked, the art he had chosen, the life he had so confidently designed for his simple wife. He had made a fatal error. He had mistaken her quietness for weakness. He thought his anchor was just dead weight. He was about to find out that an anchor, when raised, could tear the whole ship apart. She placed the statement in her purse, walked into her small home office, and dialed a number she hadn't called in over a year. "Mr. Abernathy," she said, her voice perfectly even, "it's Eleanor Vance. I have a situation, and I'm going to need your resources, all of them." The investigation began not with tears and frantic accusations, but with the quiet click of a keyboard in the dead of night. While Marcus slept, blissfully unaware, Eleanor transformed her sunlit reading nook into a command center. She wasn't a scorned wife anymore. She was a researcher, and the subject was the slow, methodical dismantling of her husband's secret life. Mr. Abernathy had, within hours, provided her with access to a top-tier private investigator, a discreet man named Peterson, who communicated only through encrypted emails. Eleanor's instructions were simple and precise. She didn't want salacious photos or dramatic confrontations. She wanted data, financial trails, communication records, names, and addresses. She provided Peterson with the information from the credit card statement, the name of the floral service, and the jeweler. It was like giving a bloodhound a scent. The first report came back in less than 48 hours. The flowers, a standing order for 24 long-stemmed white roses, were delivered every Monday morning to a Miss Chloe Dubois at an apartment in the city's newest, most fashionable residential tower, the Azure. The eternity pendant had been delivered there as well, signature required, and signed for by the same name. Chloe Dubois. The name was as sleek and modern as the building she lived in. Eleanor typed it into a search engine. Her social media profiles were public, a curated gallery of a life lived for an audience. Chloe was in her late 20s, with professionally highlighted hair, a surgically perfected smile, and a wardrobe of clothes that clung to her gym-honed body. Her posts were a tapestry of brunches at trendy restaurants, rooftop cocktails with girlfriends, and mirror selfies showcasing new bags and shoes. There were no photos of Marcus, of course. He was the silent benefactor, the off-camera financier of this perfect life. But in one photo, a seemingly innocent shot of her holding a glass of champagne on a balcony, Eleanor saw it. Gleaming against Chloe's tanned skin was the eternity pendant, a waterfall of diamonds. Her diamonds, bought with the money Marcus earned, while Eleanor managed the home that allowed him the freedom to earn it. The cold stone in her stomach twisted. The next step was to understand the battlefield, the Azure. Eleanor spent an afternoon researching the building. It was the pinnacle of modern luxury living. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a 24-hour concierge, a rooftop pool, and a state-of-the-art gym. The rent for a one-bedroom apartment, like the one Chloe presumably had, was astronomical. Far more than a woman with a vague job title like brand ambassador could afford on her own. It was a gilded cage, paid for by Marcus. Peterson's full report came a week later. It was a digital dossier of Marcus's betrayal, detailing his routine with chilling precision. Tuesdays and Thursdays were his nights with Chloe. He would leave the office, citing a dinner with clients, and drive straight to the Azure. He would stay until just after midnight before driving home, smelling of that floral hand soap. The report included GPS tracking data, phone records, and security camera stills of Marcus entering the elevator at the Azure, his face relaxed and smiling. He looked happier there than he had looked at home in years. Eleanor read every word, studied every photo, her expression unreadable. The pain was still there, a low, constant hum beneath the surface, but it was being channeled into a singular, powerful purpose. Humiliation was a weapon Marcus understood. He had been subtly wielding it against her for years. Now she would show him what it felt like to be on the receiving end. A simple divorce was too clean, too easy. He needed to understand the magnitude of his miscalculation. He needed to see the woman he had dismissed as a simple homemaker in her true and terrible glory. A new plan began to form in her mind, audacious and intricate. It started with a single question: who owned apartment 27B at the Azure? She emailed the question to Mr. Abernathy. His reply was swift. The apartment wasn't owned by an individual, but by a holding company, a faceless entity named Apex Urban Properties, LLC. This was common practice for investors, For most people, it would be a dead end. For Eleanor, with the Sterling Roads legal team at her disposal, it was a door. "Mr. Abernathy," she wrote back, her fingers flying across the keys, "I want to buy Apex Urban Properties, not make an offer on the apartment. I want the entire LLC. I want to do it quietly, and I want to do it quickly. Use a subsidiary of the Sterling Foundation, make them an offer they cannot possibly refuse, and ensure that the tenant in 27B has no idea the ownership has changed." There was a pause, then a single line of text appeared in her encrypted chat window from her old family lawyer. "Consider it done, Ms. Vance. It's good to have you back." Eleanor closed the laptop. She walked to the window and looked out at her perfect garden, the roses and hydrangeas blooming in the soft evening light. She had tended this garden with patience and care, just as she had tended her marriage. But a rot had set in, a pestilence that had worked its way into the roots. You couldn't always save a blighted plant. Sometimes you had to pull it out of the ground, shake the dirt from its roots, and let it wither in the sun. The acquisition of Apex Urban Properties, LLC, was a masterclass in silent corporate warfare. Mr. Abernathy and his team moved with the lethal efficiency of sharks gliding through deep water. They created a new shell corporation, which was then acquired by a subsidiary of the Sterling Roads Holding Company. This multi-layered approach was designed to be untraceable, a labyrinth of legal paperwork that would lead any casual observer in circles. They approached the owners of Apex, a small group of private investors, with an offer that was 30% above market value for their single property asset. The deal was contingent on absolute speed and discretion. As Mr. Abernathy had predicted, they didn't ask questions. They just signed the papers. Within 10 business days, Eleanor Vance, the quiet suburban wife, became the owner of the building that housed her husband's love nest. She was Chloe Dubois' new invisible landlady. The lease agreement, the security deposit, the monthly rent payments that Marcus was undoubtedly funding, it all belonged to her now. A wry, humorless smile touched her lips as she reviewed the final documents. Marcus was paying her for the privilege of cheating on her. The irony was so bitter it was almost sweet. With the key piece of her strategy in place, Eleanor's demeanor at home underwent a subtle but significant shift. The quiet observer became a performer. She leaned into the role Marcus had assigned her. She became more attentive, asking about his day with a gentle earnestness he mistook for devotion. She made his favorite meals. She suggested they plan a weekend getaway, just the two of us, knowing he would invent a work crisis to get out of it. "Oh, honey, I'd love to, but Q3 is just brutal," he said, his face a mask of regret. "We're launching the new campaign, and I have to be on call 24/7. Maybe next month." "Of course, dear," Eleanor replied, her voice soft with feigned disappointment. "I understand. Your work is so important." He lapped it up. Her compliance fed his ego, reinforcing his belief in her predictability. He grew bolder, more careless. The late nights became more frequent. The scent of the floral soap was a constant presence on his clothes. He started leaving his phone face up on the nightstand, confident she would never dare to look. He didn't realize she no longer needed to. She had transcended such petty snooping. She had the deed. Her own preparations continued. She met with a divorce attorney, a formidable woman named Jessica Marlowe, who had been recommended by Mr. Abernathy. Jessica was sharp, impeccably dressed, and had a reputation for eviscerating arrogant husbands in court. Eleanor laid out the entire situation, omitting no detail, from her hidden fortune to her recent acquisition of the apartment. Jessica listened, her pen still, her eyes fixed on Eleanor. When Eleanor finished, the lawyer leaned back in her leather chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice filled with undisguised admiration, "in 20 years of practicing family law, I have seen every kind of revenge plot imaginable. But this is a work of art. It's not just about the law, it's biblical." They worked out the legal strategy. The prenuptial agreement Marcus had insisted upon, the one designed to protect his future earnings from a wife with no assets of her own, was now Eleanor's greatest shield. It would protect her entire family fortune from any claim he could possibly make. They would let him serve her with divorce papers first, allowing him to set the narrative that he was leaving a tired, empty marriage. They would let him believe he was in complete control. The final piece of the plan was the most difficult. It required a level of emotional fortitude Eleanor wasn't sure she possessed. She had to orchestrate a public confrontation. She needed a witness, an impartial observer who could attest to Marcus's cruelty. It had to be a place where he would feel exposed and cornered, a place where his carefully constructed image would be threatened, forcing him to lash out. Through Chloe's social media, Eleanor learned the name of their favorite restaurant, Cyrano's, a ridiculously expensive French bistro known for its hushed atmosphere and celebrity clientele. Chloe had posted a photo of their coq au vin just last week, with the caption, "Spoiled by my mystery man, Charan luckiest girl." Eleanor booked a table for one for the following Tuesday night, the night she knew Marcus would be with Chloe. She chose a small, discreet table in a corner, one with a clear view of the restaurant's entrance. Then she called her sister, Sarah, the only other person in the world who knew the full truth about her life. "Sarah," she said, "I need a favor. I need you to call me on Tuesday night at exactly 8:15 p.m. I need you to be upset about something, anything. Make it convincing, and no matter what I say, just keep talking." "Elle, what's going on?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with concern. "You sound different." "I'm finally dusting off the family silver," Eleanor replied, a strange calm settling over her. "It's time to set the table for a feast." Tuesday evening arrived with the heavy stillness that precedes a storm. Eleanor dressed with deliberate care, choosing an outfit that was the antithesis of her usual style. She bypassed her sensible cardigans and muted tones, instead selecting a simple but exquisitely cut sheath dress in a deep sapphire blue. It was a color Marcus had once told her did nothing for her, which was precisely why she chose it. She wore her hair down, letting it fall in soft waves over her shoulders. The final touch was a pair of diamond stud earrings, a gift from her father years ago, small but flawless. They were her own, untainted by Marcus's lies. Walking into Cyrano's felt like stepping onto a stage. The air was thick with the scent of butter, wine, and money. A deferential host led her to her small corner table. From her vantage point, she could see the entire room, a panorama of soft lighting, white tablecloths, and quiet conversations. She ordered a glass of Sancerre and settled in to wait, her heart a steady, rhythmic drum against her ribs. She was not nervous. She was a hunter in a blind, patient and focused. At precisely 8:05 p.m., they walked in. Marcus was laughing, his arm draped possessively around Chloe's shoulders. He looked handsome and vital, every inch the successful executive. Chloe was radiant, dressed in a tight red dress that turned heads as she passed. The eternity pendant glittered at her throat, a beacon of his betrayal. The host, with a knowing smile that suggested Marcus was a regular, led them to a prominent table in the center of the room, a table for lovers. Eleanor watched them, a detached observer studying a foreign species. She saw the way he leaned in to whisper in Chloe's ear, the way Chloe laughed, tilting her head back. She saw him order a bottle of champagne she knew he couldn't really afford. He was performing, playing the role of the magnanimous provider for his adoring mistress. For a moment, the ice around Eleanor's heart threatened to crack. 10 years, a decade of shared memories, inside jokes and quiet moments. Were they all just a prelude to this? A lie she had helped co-author. She took a sip of her wine, the cold liquid a welcome shock to her system. This was not the time for sentiment. This was the time for strategy. At 8:14 p.m., she placed her phone on the table. As if on cue, at 8:15, it buzzed to life, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. Eleanor answered, pitching her voice just loud enough to carry. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Slow down, I can't understand you," she said, her brow furrowed in concern. Her voice, unexpected in the hushed restaurant, cut through the ambient chatter. Across the room, Marcus's head snapped up. His eyes scanned the restaurant and then locked with hers. For a split second, his charming smile faltered, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated panic. He saw her. He saw his wife, his simple, predictable wife, sitting alone in the same restaurant where he was dining with his mistress. The panic quickly morphed into something else. Fury. His face darkened. He muttered something to Chloe, who looked over at Eleanor with a confused, slightly contemptuous expression. Eleanor kept her focus on her phone call, playing her part. "No, of course it's not a bad time," she said into the phone, her voice laced with manufactured urgency. "Just tell me what happened." She watched from the corner of her eye as Marcus pushed his chair back, his movements sharp and angry. He was coming over, the trap was set. He arrived at her table like a thundercloud, his large frame blocking out the light. He didn't speak to her, he spoke at her, his voice a low, vicious hiss meant to intimidate. "What in the hell are you doing here, Eleanor?" She looked up at him, her expression one of mild surprise, as if noticing him for the first time. "Marcus, what a coincidence." She turned her attention back to the phone. "Sarah, hold on 1 second, dear." "Don't you Marcus me," he seethed, placing his hands flat on her small table, leaning into her space. "A coincidence? In a city of 8 million people, you just happen to show up at the same restaurant as me. Are you following me now? Is that what this is?" His voice was rising in volume, drawing the attention of the surrounding tables. People were starting to stare. A young waitress, Maria, who had been refilling a water glass nearby, paused, her eyes wide. This was exactly what Eleanor had wanted. An audience. "Following you?" Eleanor asked, her voice a model of calm reason. "Don't be ridiculous. I was meeting a friend, but she had to cancel. I decided to have dinner by myself." "Dinner by yourself?" he scoffed, his laugh a harsh, ugly sound. "You haven't had dinner by yourself in 10 years. Your life is so pathetic and empty that you have to resort to stalking your own husband just to feel something. It's sad. It's truly deeply sad." He was projecting, taking his own guilt and shame and twisting it into a weapon to use against her. He was trying to humiliate her into silence, to make her shrink and disappear as she always did. But the woman he was speaking to was not the woman he thought he knew. Eleanor slowly placed her phone face down on the table. She looked up at him, her gaze clear and unwavering. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "My life is not empty, Marcus," she said, her voice cutting through his bluster with the clean precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "It's just that the parts of it that involve you have become profoundly disappointing." His face went rigid. He was not expecting a retort. He was expecting tears. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he snarled. "Oh, I think I do," she said, taking a deliberate sip of her wine. She glanced over his shoulder at Chloe, who was watching the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. "I know all about your strategy sessions, your client dinners, and your taste in expensive jewelry. And I know all about apartment 27B at the Azure." The color drained from Marcus's face. The mention of the specific apartment number was a direct hit, a confirmation that this was no coincidence. He was caught. But his arrogance was a cornered animal, and it came out fighting. "You had me investigated," he whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "After everything I've given you, the home, the life, you go behind my back and spy on me." "You call this a life?" Eleanor replied, her voice still unnervingly calm. "This charade, this web of lies held together by your condescension and my silence. No, Marcus, this isn't a life. It's a cage you built for me, and I'm simply letting myself out." She stood up, her movements fluid and graceful. She was taller than he expected when she wasn't hunched over her garden. She placed a few bills on the table to cover her wine. "Enjoy your dinner," she said, her gaze sweeping over him, and then to Chloe, a look that held not anger, but a sort of clinical pity. "I believe you're having the coq au vin. I hear it's to die for." She turned and walked away, her back straight, her head held high. The entire restaurant was silent, every eye on her. She didn't look back. She could feel Marcus's stare burning into her, a mixture of pure hatred and, for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear. He had tried to humiliate her in public, to paint her as a pathetic, stalking wife. Instead, she had exposed him as a common, cheating husband, and she had done it without raising her voice. The first battle was won. But the war was far from over. The final devastating blow was yet to come. The aftermath of the restaurant confrontation was a suffocating silence. Marcus came home late that night, long after Eleanor had turned off her light. He didn't try to enter their bedroom, instead sleeping in the guest room at the far end of the hall. No apology was offered, no explanation given. The next morning, he was gone before she woke up, leaving only the faint, cloying scent of stale champagne in the air. He was stewing in his rage, convinced she had played her only card. In his mind, she had exposed him, and now she would either retreat into bitter silence or file for a messy, emotional divorce. He still believed he held all the power. Eleanor, meanwhile, moved with the serene focus of a chess master in the final stages of a game. The public humiliation was not the endgame. It was a strategic move designed to rattle her opponent, to make him overconfident and angry. His rage would make him sloppy. She spent the day with her lawyer, Jessica Marlowe, finalizing the paperwork. They prepared the response to the divorce petition they knew Marcus would soon file. They compiled the evidence from the private investigator, the financial statements showing the extravagant spending on Chloe, and, most importantly, the newly minted deeds and ownership documents for Apex Urban Properties, LLC. He'll likely file by the end of the week, Jessica advised, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the thick stack of papers. He'll want to control the narrative. He'll paint you as unstable, possibly obsessive. The restaurant scene will be his Exhibit A. Let him, Eleanor said calmly. The story he tells won't matter once the truth comes out. And the truth is in these documents. That evening, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in years. She opened the locked chest at the foot of her bed, a relic from her old life. Inside, nestled in velvet, was the Sterling Rhodes family jewelry. She bypassed the ostentatious necklaces and bracelets, her fingers settling on a simple, elegant brooch made of platinum and sapphires. It had been her mother's. Pinning it to the lapel of her blazer felt like putting on a suit of armor. The next 48 hours passed in a tense quiet. Marcus was a ghost in their home, communicating only through terse, functional text messages about household matters. He was biding his time, consulting his own lawyers, building his case against her. He was preparing to obliterate the simple wife who had dared to embarrass him. The moment came on Thursday evening. It was his night with Chloe. Eleanor knew he would go to her, seeking comfort and reaffirming their bond after the disastrous dinner. He would paint Eleanor as a crazy, jealous woman, and Chloe, eager for her role as the cherished replacement, would believe every word. At 7 p.m., Eleanor stood in her kitchen, holding her phone. Her heart, which had been so steady, now hammered against her ribs. This was it, the point of no return. She composed a text message to Marcus, her thumb hovering over the send button. We need to talk, face to face. It can't wait. I'm outside the apartment building now, let me up. She deliberately left the message ambiguous. He would assume she was talking about their home, that she was waiting outside their brownstone. But she wasn't at home. She was standing on the rain-slicked pavement across the street from the Azure, a cool evening drizzle misting her face. A black town car, arranged by Mr. Abernathy, idled silently at the curb behind her. Inside sat two men, a licensed and bonded locksmith and the official building manager for the Azure, a man who now answered to her. She hit send. A minute later, Marcus's reply came through. What apartment? I'm at the office. A lie. Peterson's real-time tracking showed his car parked in the Azure's underground garage for the last hour. Eleanor typed her response, the words precise and chilling. The Azure, apartment 27B. I know you're there, Marcus. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Come down and face me. The silence on the other end was profound. She could almost feel his panic through the phone. How did she know he was there, right now? The restaurant was one thing, but this felt like something else entirely. This was surveillance. This was omnipotence. He would be furious, but he would also be unnerved. His carefully compartmentalized world was collapsing. 5 long minutes passed. Then a new message. Stay right there. I'm coming down. Eleanor slipped the phone into her pocket. She nodded to the men in the car. The building manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, got out and joined her, holding a clipboard. The locksmith remained in the car, waiting for his cue. The glass doors of the Azure slid open and Marcus strode out. He had forgone a coat, and the drizzle was already darkening the shoulders of his suit jacket. His face was a thunderous mask of rage. He saw Eleanor standing there, calm and composed, and his anger intensified. He saw her as an invader, a contamination of his secret, perfect world. You have lost your mind, he spat, his voice low and shaking with fury as he closed the distance between them. Following me to my friend's home? Harassing her? This is beyond pathetic, Eleanor. This is stalking. This is a crime. He had already constructed his narrative. Chloe was just a friend. Eleanor was the unstable aggressor. I'm not here to harass anyone, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt deep inside. I'm here on business. Business? He let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. What possible business could you have here? Did you get a job watering the plants in the lobby? The condescension was automatic, a reflex he couldn't control. It was his last desperate attempt to reassert his dominance, to put her back in the small box he had built for her. Eleanor didn't answer his jibe. Instead, she turned to the man beside her. Mr. Henderson, she said, her tone polite but firm. This is Marcus Vance. He is a guest of the tenant in 27B, Miss Chloe Dubois. Mr. Henderson, who had been briefed on the situation, nodded gravely. Mr. Vance. Marcus looked from Eleanor to the building manager, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. What is this? Who is this? This is Mr. Henderson, Eleanor explained calmly. He's the building manager. I believe you've met in the lobby before. Then she delivered the line that would detonate his reality. He works for me. Marcus stared at her, his mind struggling to process the words. Works for you? What are you talking about? Did you complain to the management company? Did you tell them some sob story? He was still searching for a scenario that fit his understanding of the world, a world in which he was powerful and she was not. No, Marcus, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, which made it all the more chilling. I didn't complain to the management company. I am the management company. Or, to be more precise, I am the owner of the holding company that owns this building. I own this lobby. I own the elevators. I own the rooftop pool where Chloe takes her selfies. And most importantly, I own apartment 27B. She paused, letting the information sink in. She watched as the anger on his face slowly gave way to a profound, disbelieving confusion. His brain was short-circuiting. The concepts, Eleanor, and owner of this multi-million-dollar high-rise were so fundamentally incompatible in his mind that they simply would not connect. You're lying, he stammered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. It came out as a weak, questioning sound. Am I? Eleanor gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Mr. Henderson. The building manager stepped forward, holding his clipboard. Mr. Vance, he said in a formal, practiced tone, I have here an official notice for the tenant of apartment 27B, Miss Chloe Dubois. Her lease is being terminated, effective immediately, due to a violation of the occupancy clause. She has 30 days to vacate the premises. As the property owner, Mrs. Vance has exercised her right to terminate the agreement. Mr. Henderson held out the clipboard with the official notarized document clipped to it. Marcus stared at the paper, at the letterhead that read, Apex Urban Properties, and then at the signature at the bottom, Eleanor Sterling Vance. Sterling. The name hung in the air between them, a ghost from a past he had never bothered to investigate. It was at that moment that the apartment door buzzed open. Chloe, looking annoyed and impatient, stepped out into the hallway. Marcus, what is taking so long? You said you'd be right back. Her words died in her throat as she saw the scene in the hallway. Marcus, pale and frozen, a strange official-looking man with a clipboard, and Eleanor. Chloe's eyes widened in recognition and fear. You, she breathed, looking at Eleanor. What are you doing here? You need to leave. I'm calling security. That won't be necessary, Miss Dubois, Eleanor said, her voice devoid of any emotion. She took the clipboard from Mr. Henderson and stepped toward the younger woman. Mr. Henderson is security, and as I was just explaining to Marcus, I own the building. I'm your landlady. She held out the notice of eviction. This is for you. As I'm sure Marcus has told you, our marriage is over. Therefore, the financial arrangement that allows you to live here is also over. You have 30 days. Chloe stared at the paper, then at Eleanor, then at Marcus, seeking an explanation, a denial, anything. Marcus? What is she talking about? Tell me she's crazy. But Marcus was silent. His world had tilted on its axis and was now spinning out of control. He looked at Eleanor, truly looked at her for the first time in a decade. He didn't see the simple homemaker, the quiet anchor. He saw the sapphire brooch on her blazer. He saw the cold, calculating intelligence in her eyes. He saw the undeniable authority with which she commanded the situation. He saw a stranger, a powerful, formidable woman he had never known. And he finally understood. She hadn't been following him, she hadn't been stalking him. She had been so far ahead of him that he couldn't even comprehend the game she was playing. The apartment he had seen as his secret kingdom, his escape from his mundane life, was just a cage she had bought and paid for. He was the mouse and she owned the maze. The sheer scale of his miscalculation hit him like a physical force. The mockery in the restaurant, the years of condescension, the arrogant belief in his own superiority, it all crashed down on him at once. He had not just underestimated her, he had been a fool, a blind, arrogant fool, and she had allowed him to walk right into a trap of his own making. His legs felt weak. The polished marble floor of the lobby seemed to sway beneath his feet. A roaring sound filled his ears, blocking out Chloe's frantic questions and Eleanor's calm, measured voice. He reached out a hand, trying to brace himself against the wall, but his fingers found only empty air. His face, which had been flushed with rage just moments before, was now a ghastly, waxy white. "Marcus." Eleanor's voice seemed to come from a great distance. He opened his mouth to speak, to rage, to plead, but no sound came out. A black veil descended over his vision. The strength fled his body, and he crumpled, his expensive suit folding around him as he slid down the cool, unforgiving wall of the building his wife owned, collapsing into a heap on the floor. He had been brought down not by a shout, but by a signature on a deed. The man who saw himself as a king had just discovered he was nothing more than a pawn in a queen's masterful checkmate. The aftermath was not dramatic or explosive, but rather a quiet, systematic dismantling. Marcus's collapse in the lobby of the Azure was a pathetic spectacle of a man whose entire reality had been pulled out from under him. The paramedics who were called found him conscious but disoriented, suffering from what they diagnosed as an acute panic attack. Eleanor watched, her expression unreadable, as they helped him onto a gurney. She felt no pity, no triumph, only a profound and weary sense of closure. She had exposed the rot, and now it was time to clear it away. Chloe Dubois vanished from the picture with remarkable speed. Faced with an eviction notice from a woman who clearly held all the cards, she packed her bags and was gone within a week, leaving the eternity pendant on the kitchen counter. Eleanor had Mr. Henderson retrieve it and mail it to Jessica Marlowe's office, where it was logged as an asset to be dealt with in the divorce settlement. The apartment, now empty, was professionally cleaned and immediately put back on the rental market. It was just a property, a tool that had served its purpose. The divorce proceedings were brutally efficient. Marcus, humbled and broken, hired a lawyer who quickly realized the futility of fighting. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad. Jessica Marlowe presented the evidence of adultery with cold, irrefutable clarity. The financial records, the private investigator's report, and the sworn testimony of Mr. Henderson regarding the events at the Azure painted a picture of such calculated deceit on Marcus's part that the judge barely looked at him. News of the scandal, particularly the audacious detail of Eleanor owning the mistress's apartment, leaked to the press. Marcus's firm, fiercely protective of its public image, terminated his employment, citing a violation of their code of conduct. In a matter of weeks, he lost his wife, his mistress, his home, and his career. He was left with nothing but his crushing legal bills and the ruinous knowledge of his own spectacular folly. Eleanor, on the other hand, began to live. She sold the brownstone, a house that had always felt more like his than hers, and moved into a magnificent penthouse apartment overlooking the city. It was a space filled with light, art she chose, and books she loved. She shed the persona of the simple homemaker like a heavy coat she had worn for too long. The sensible cardigans were replaced by elegant, tailored clothing. She reconnected with old friends from her former life, people who had always known her as the intelligent, capable woman she truly was. She took an active role in managing the Sterling Roads Foundation, channeling her formidable focus and resources into projects that helped women escaping difficult domestic situations. She understood, on a visceral level, the power of financial independence and the subtle ways in which women could be made to feel small and powerless. Her work was not just philanthropy, it was a mission. One crisp autumn afternoon, about a year after the divorce was finalized, she was having lunch at an outdoor cafe. The waitress who served her was the same young woman, Maria, from Cyrano's. The girl's eyes widened in recognition. "Mrs. Vance?" she asked hesitantly. "I remember you, from that night at the restaurant." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile. "I remember you too," she said. "I just wanted to say," the waitress continued, lowering her voice, "what you did that night, how you handled him. It was amazing. We were all rooting for you." Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had not sought an audience or applause, but this small acknowledgement from a stranger felt like a validation of her long, painful journey. She had not just reclaimed her life, she had become an inspiration, a quiet symbol of strength for another woman who had witnessed her stand up for herself. She looked out at the bustling city, at the endless sea of possibilities stretching before her. The name Vance was just a legal remnant she would soon change. The woman she was now was Eleanor Sterling Rhodes, a name that felt like coming home. She had once hidden her power to find love, only to discover that true power came from loving and respecting herself. She had been an anchor for a man who was unworthy of her, but now she was the entire ship, charting her own course into a bright and boundless future.